The Fujifilm X100VI seems like a case of nice guys finish last. Why, you ask? While you're calmly waiting in line for your pre-order to arrive, the not so nice guy scalpers already bought all of them to sell for insane prices. Let's roll back a bit. What happened? The previous version, the X100V, was picked up by some influential TikTokers who said, "Oh my god, this is an amazing camera. I don't know anything about photography, but I love it. Selfie." And that caused it to be sold out almost everywhere. I hear what you're thinking. These scalpers are people who deserve to be slapped in the face with a wet toasty. Actually, that would be a waste of the toasty. Let's make it a dirty wet sock. I tested the camera for weeks on photography, film and handling. I will tell you about some cool and unique features and shortcomings you should know about. Highlights of this camera are not just the retro design 40 megapixel sensor and X processor 5, but also the in-body image stabilization, ND filter, optical/electronic viewfinder, 6.2K 30 FPS and 4K up to 60 FPS film, AI-backed subject recognition and a ton of baked-in film simulations with a new one called Reala Ace, which I used a lot. The X100VI focuses on street photography and is more a photo than a video camera. As you will see later in this video, it does deliver quality film and therefore is still usable as a hybrid camera where you can combine photography and film. It has a fixed lens and that makes it a compact camera. Even though it's not the compactest of all, it still fits in the bigger pockets of your coat. It has a Fujinon 23mm f2 lens, which equals to a 35mm field of view if you convert this to a full-frame sensor. This is because it is using an APS-C sensor with a crop of 1.5 times. In general, street photographers love the 35 and 50mm field of view because it compares most to what we humans see with our eyes. Now, there are questions if the 23mm Fujinon lens, which is the same as the previous version, can handle the 40 megapixels. I'm not able to compare the two cameras since I don't have the old version, but I did zoom in on all the photos to notice their sharpness from edge to edge. And of course, Fujifilm is not going to use a lens on a camera that won't be able to manage the 40 megapixels. And then there's the question of zooming. The sensor had an upgrade going from 26 to 40 megapixels using the same sensor and processor as the X-T5. You can zoom in on the pixels by simply turning the ring on the lens. This goes in steps of 50 and 70 millimeters. Zooming into 50mm gives a 20 and 70mm gives a 10 megapixel photo. The plus side of zooming in before the photo is taken is that compression takes place after you press the shutter, which means you zoom in on non-compressed pixels and that should result in better quality. Though in reality, I doubt if you will see the difference. The 521 gram weighing camera is 48 grams heavier and in total 2 millimeters thicker than the X100V. This has to do with the addition of 5-axis and 6 stops in body stabilization. The X100VI, which is available in gray black and complete black, has quite an undeep grip. There are thumb hooks and grip additions available, but for this price, I just want a camera that's comfortable without having to spend money on accessories. Who wants to be pretty has to suffer, I guess. The X100VI body feels well made and very strong. It has 3 dials and an FN button on the top, 6 buttons, a joystick and a dial on the back, which can function as button 2. The front has a dial, button and lever, which you can move 2 ways but only has a function if you pull it to the right. On the left side of the body, you find the single, continuous and manual options, and I like this a lot as it speeds up your workflow. On the right side of the body, you find the microphone input, USB-C charging and transfer port and a micro HDMI port. It is possible to connect the headphone with an adapter into the USB-C port, but that cable doesn't come with the package. The shutter speed dial has a dual purpose. If you lift it up, you are able to change the ISO speed. Put it on C in order to use the front dial to change the ISO, just like a regular mirrorless camera. The shutter speed you can change with both the top dial and the dial on the back of the camera. It is good to know that when you set the shutter speed with the top dial to, let's say, 500, that the shutter speed is still adjustable with the dial on the back from 320 to 800. For shutter speeds up to 15 minutes, set the top dial to T. But be aware of a processing time that might take as long as the shutter speed you set. If, for some reason, you need an extremely fast shutter speed, you can set it to a whopping 180,000th of a second when using the electronic shutter. In terms of buttons and usability, I must say it is great to feel and hear those clicks but the exposure compensation wheel doesn't have a lock and it's easy to accidentally change the settings. So always make sure to put the exposure back to 0. The tiny joystick is not great. When navigating through the menus, I sometimes click left instead of down or the other way around, which causes you to enter menus you don't want. And since the menu is not touchable, you have to use the tiny joystick or the scroll dials. As for FN buttons, you have quite some options. One that I love with Fujifilm is the option to use swipe movements. You can set these by going to the button/dial settings and FN settings menu. This way you get 4 extra FN options like level meter, subject detection, shutter type and histogram. When you press the button at the front, by default, you can choose which function the focus ring has. If you know you don't want to use the digital zoom, you can set it to white balance or film simulation selector 2. If you set the camera to manual focus mode, the ring on the lens will always function as a focus ring. I will sell you this X100VI if you subscribe and like this video. I won't. I want to be able to test more Fujifilm cameras in the future, so gotta send you back. The X100VI uses the NPW126S battery, which should last for 450 shots, and that is as much as the previous version. During my hike, I only had a single battery and noticed it just made it through a day where I shot JPEG and RAW and 6.2K video. So it is not the best, but as long as you turn the camera off directly after shooting, it will almost last a day. The good thing is that a quick 20-minute charge via the USB-C port will give you about half of the battery. My advice would be to always carry a second battery or make some charging stops, and maybe also buy a charger since it doesn't come with the camera. Unique to this camera is the fact that you can choose between an optical and electronic viewfinder by putting the lever to the right. If you use the optical viewfinder, it is possible to digitally show information in the screen. Since the OVF is placed on the top left, you see something different than the sensor captures. Luckily, you can turn on a guide grid which helps you to frame in the right way. It is also possible to digitally show all photo settings and you can adjust them in the OVF setting menu. The 3-inch LCD screen is tiltable and I like that it is very easy to make the screen very bright, and this helps a lot in sunny environments. Since it's a photo-oriented camera, it is logical no vari-angle system has been used, but the fact that the screen can only tilt up and not to the side, like the X-T5 does, is a huge downside and a reason why I wouldn't buy this camera. Whenever you hold the camera vertically and want to take a photo low to the ground, you have no idea what you're shooting, and I think that's quite bad for a street photography camera. Yes, it would need a bigger system where you can also tilt vertically, but I prefer that over not having this option at all. Even though not many people will use the film function on this camera, I do want to talk about it. Where cameras like the XS20 and X-T5 film 6.2K 3:2 ratio up to 30 FPS, the X100VI records 6.2K 16:9, adding up to a resolution of 6240 by 3510. The maximum bitrate is 200 Mbps in 422 10-bit, and that's lower than the 360 Mbps of the X-T5 and XS20, but still high enough for high-end video. In 4K HQ, you get 16:9 4K footage oversampled from 6.2K up to 30 FPS. If you would like to film 4K 60 FPS, your footage will be normal 4K. The same counts for the DCI 17:9 formats. Good to know about filming with the X100VI is that the rotation of the camera is captured as well. So if you would film vertically, you will get a vertical file, and this is quite handy since you don't have to rotate this file yourself in post-production. You can use the built-in film simulations as well, but these will be stuck to the image and that might be difficult if you want to color correct the images yourself. It is also possible to film in F-Log, F-Log 2 and HLG, and if you want to know more about that, click here in the top corner. In terms of memory cards, I am using this card, which is fast enough for the 6K footage and burst photography on this camera. We can't deny Fujifilm has a beautiful color science and delivers natural colors. Photos can be taken in RAW, JPEG and high format. HEIF is the more efficient 10-bit format, giving more color information than the 8-bit JPEGs, and even puts out files that are smaller in file size than JPEGs are. But Windows computers might have trouble viewing these images, so you will be needing some extra software. For a while, Fujifilm has been offering film simulations where you can simulate the colors and contrast of their old film rolls. New to the X100VI is Reala Ace, which includes the first 4th layer technology, offering natural color reproduction. I really enjoyed the colors and contrast of this simulation, and I hope Fujifilm will bring it to their other models via firmware updates. All these unedited images are taken with Reala Ace, and if you want to shoot with film simulations, it is advised to shoot in JPEG plus RAW, so you can always add your own style of editing. This is because none of the simulations are applied to the RAW files. For the most retro style photos, you could use the internal flash up to shutter speeds of 1/2000th of a second. Make sure sound and flash in the sound user settings are on and then move to the flash menu. With the scroll wheel on the back, you can set the flash the way you would like, and you actually have quite some control over the timing of the flash. For example, you can choose if the flash fires at the first curtain or at the second curtain just before the shutter closes. For the fast work, you can set the continuous mode up to 20 shots per second with a 1.29 crop when using the electronic shutter. If you want to shoot without crop, you can reach 11 FPS with the mechanical and 13 FPS with the electronic shutter. A great addition is the built-in ND filter, which is easy to turn on. Keep pulling the lever to the right and you'll see the ND filter will start doing its work. The filter is not adjustable and has 4 stops, and that helps quite a lot when there's too much light. This way you can use wider apertures to separate the subjects from the background or extend the shutter speed. Focus on the X100VI is done by face detection and is backed by AI and 117 or 425 focus points. The AI focus helps recognizing subjects better and faster. Subjects recognized are the eyes, heads and faces of humans and animals, as well as insects, trains, planes, cars, birds, bikes and motorcycles. Now, for a camera with a wide-angle lens, I wonder how useful bird and insect focus is, but I guess it's good to have. During my test, I noticed it was very fast in picking up faces and eyes, and even would recognize my shadow as a person and the heads of humans when these were seen from the back. It's very easy to select the focus area by tapping on the screen, and within the menu you can choose for a single point, zone, white/slash tracking or all. Custom zones are also possible, where you can shape the focus box yourself. With the top dial, you can set the ISO from native 125 up to 12,800, but in C mode you can go up to 51,200. You can go all the way down to ISO 64, but 125 is native and is sharp and clean. The same counts for 800, and 1600 is fine. Above that you're gonna start seeing some more noise, but it is quite the same if you compare to other cameras. It's not the best, it's not the worst, but don't buy it for low light. In order to test the internal image stabilization, I wanted to take some handheld evening shots with longer shutter speeds. As you can see, it is possible to make these kind of shots where the stabilization corrects the movements of your hand. With shots longer than a second, you will start to see movement though. As for stabilization in film, I am quite impressed as well. The effective wide angle of 35mm helps to make the stabilization easier. But as you can see in this clip, footage of me walking and holding the camera in my hand without accessories looks pretty shaky. I have the basic and digital stabilization turned on. This is f2.0, and I just wanted to test how the audio is and how the focus on my eyes is. I have eye focus on now, so see if it focuses well. Another cool option is the built-in shutter count. This mostly comes in handy when you want to sell or buy a second-hand X100VI. The X100VI is filled with bracketing options. Think of ISO, white balance, focus, dynamic range, and even film simulation bracketing. You can take multi-exposure shots or direct HDR shots with different ranges. If that isn't enough, you could try out panoramas, which will edit inside of the camera, and you could add filters such as toy camera, miniature, partial colors, or dynamic tone. Even though you might not use it a lot, it is very cool. It is all included in the camera and ready to play with. Panoramas, for example, can be taken in different directions, which allow you to take a photo of a complete tall building while you're standing in front of it. These consumer options do allow you to get very creative without the need of post-production software. The X100VI is not a camera for beginners and focuses on more advanced users who like to use the manual settings. As you can see, the whole camera is built around that with its switches and dials. Now, it does have fully automatic possibilities, but come on. In all honesty, I thought the camera was quite difficult to use at the first time, but after a half a day of trying and dropping it a few times, you will get the hang of it. I would not recommend this camera as your first ever model, since you might outgrow it quite fast. Is it worth the upgrade from the X100V? Well, only if you really need those 40 megapixels. Is this the ideal travel camera? Size and quality wise, it actually might be, but it lacks actual zoom, side tiltable screen, and weather resistance. This last one is sort of fixable with a special lens lens ring. But the input cover on the side doesn't seem to keep water outside as there is no rubber sealing, so I wouldn't trust it as a weather-sealed camera. Can you get your hands on it? If you were already convinced with the 6th version, put down your pre-order now, as it isn't in stock anywhere. I called around camera stores in the Netherlands and they told me I would get it in 1 year. And that is my major concern with this camera. It is pretty cool, takes amazing photos, but it's very difficult to get your hands on. If this was useful to you, please subscribe and like this video and watch these videos.